Ian Davis here from Yellow Dog Fly Fishing Adventures, coming to you from my home away from home, Andros Island in the Bahamas. I kind of grew up fishing here, and this is where I really cut my teeth into saltwater angling, and just want to talk a little bit about casting in the wind. One of the most important things about fishing in adverse conditions is understanding how fly rods are built. When they create the graphite on the rod, they're theoretically wrapping the graphite around a mandrel. So think of it like wrapping a piece of paper around a pencil, and that determines the weight of the rod, the taper. And so when we're casting, we always want to point the reel where we're in the direction we're casting. And what that does is it uses the spline of the rod, which is where the last piece of graphite stops. And like a piece of paper around a pencil, the seam. And when you buy a high quality fly rod, they put the seam on the top or the bottom. And so when I'm casting, I don't want the reel open like this, facing over there. I want to point the reel, so I'm using the spline of the rod. And that's with any type fly fishing. Next is I want to make sure that I know which direction the wind is coming. And so if the wind's behind me, I'm going to put most of my energy on the back cast and then a nice easy forecast, because the wind will help my line unfurl into in the direction of the fish. But I've got to power it more on the back cast because I'm pushing it into the wind. And then vice versa, if I'm casting into the wind, I don't need to put so much energy into the back cast, but I do need to push it a little bit more on the forecast. And one thing I'm a big believer in, to reduce the size of your loop, and when you're casting into the wind, you want a tighter loop so it has less surface area on the front end of the D, right? If you have a big wide loop, it's going to knock that down because of that wind. By having a tight loop, it punches through the wind. So I define the size of my loop by when I come past my ear, I squeeze with my bottom two fingers and I push with my thumb. It's not a wrist, because a wrist leads to a tailing loop. It's just a squeeze. And so when I come back, I squeeze the rod, and that makes a tighter loop, therefore punching into the wind a little bit easier without over muscling the rod. And then obviously use a 9-weight instead of an 8-weight. I've even used 10 weights sometimes down here just to make a easier presentation with less false casting. And then lastly, one great tip for any type casting is the more line you have in the air, the greater distance your hand has to travel to support that line. So short cast is like this, and then the longer the cast, my hand just travels further. And I like a smooth start into an accelerated stop with that squeeze, and that will carry the line. That's why Joan Wolfe is one of the most beautiful casters in the world and can throw a whole fly line, because she understands that it's not power, it's just distance. The greater distance my hand travels, the more line I can carry. And then lastly, when we're presenting the fly, I think it's really important to not let the hand slip through like this, but you want to make an A-OK sign and let the line run through it like that. And the A-OK sign has less surface area than your hand like that. If I do that, it's just like the first one of these, the stripping guides, the shooting guide. So when I go to cast, nice and smooth, little double haul, and then an A-OK sign. And then I've got a grip of the line, so it goes right into my trigger finger and I can strip. If I let go of the line, it gets wrapped around the rod or the reel, fish eats, broken off, right? So A-OK sign enables you to shoot more line with less friction, as well as have great line control, so that when I cast, and I've seen it happen a million times, you drop that fly and the fly lands and the bonefish will rise up off the bottom and take it mid-water column. If you're not in your trigger finger and you can't give it a strip set right away, there's too much slack. You're going to lose that fish. So those are the main components and details that I think about when I'm casting in the wind.